when we talk about endocrine disrupting chemicals, it might seem like a big, like, what are they? Like, okay, endocrine, I know they're hormonal, they disrupt, but how, right? The ones I love to focus on are those that disrupt estrogen and testosterone. And, let's talk about estrogen. There are chemicals, particularly a lot of in our personal care products and plastics, perfume products, and some foods that actually can act like estrogen. So what that means is there's a lot of different ways that they can act like estrogen and affect the estrogen receptor. But the most common one, I think the easiest one to describe, is that many of them actually mimic estrogen. They actually look enough like estrogen, and that they can unlock the little key to the door of the estrogen receptor on cells. So they can fit into that same lock and key and turn on the cell, stimulating the cell like estrogen would. So what that means is that you may not be producing the estrogen in your body from your ovaries or your adrenals, but your body's seeing extra estrogen from chemicals that is actually doing the same effect on the cells as the au naturel estrogen in your body. So what that means is your body's actually getting a signal that you have more estrogen on board than you really are making in your body from a lot of these endocrine disrupting chemicals that we talk about in toxins. So, they essentially do that same pathway and, give you the same effects. And the most common ones I see in women are, you can have menstrual irregularities, such as heavier, more painful bleeding, a very common and more frequent periods. That's something I see a lot. Weight gain, again, another one I see a lot. A third one I see all the time is mood issues. Women become much more irritable.
Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of the Reshape Your Health podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Morgan Nolte, and today we have Dr. Renee Wellenstein with us. She's a double board certified doctor. She's been working with women for over 20 years now, and because of her own personal health story, which you're going to learn about in a minute, she stepped out of conventional medicine and into functional medicine. She's becoming an expert in adrenal dysfunction and low libido, and that is what we're talking about today. Dr. Renee, thank you for joining us. I'm really excited for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
Yeah, so we did some planning beforehand just to give the audience a heads up. We kind of talked about how, low libido or adrenal dysfunction is kind of two sides of the coin. Just like I talk about weight loss, there's a science side to low libido for sure, some hormonal things. And then there's a mindset side, and that we're going to cover both of those today. We're going to start with those hormones and the sciencey side. And then towards the end of the interview, we're going to touch on mindset, because just like in weight loss, I can give you all the strategies, but if you're still kind of trying to build on a faulty foundation, on a faulty mindset foundation, they're not going to be effective. But before we get there, tell us your story, because you have a really interesting journey into this functional medicine space.
I do. I never expected to be here. And, it was 2012 is when my story began, but we'll go back a little bit before that, because I was a very busy but happy OBGYN. I had boy-girl twins in 2007. And at that time, I was living in a suburb of New York City, and it was great in my younger years. But after I had kids, I decided, gosh, this is just not the life I want. It was very super busy. Wasn't utilizing all the resources in the city. So we decided to move to the country. And of course, what do you do when you move to the country? And I am a daughter of a former dairy farmer who had wanted a horse when she was 7. I finally got my dream horse at the age of 39. And it's much more affordable to have a horse in the country versus New York City. And the timeline is all blurry, but I did fall off that horse shortly after getting him during a lesson. And that is really where my story begins, because that fall resulted in a broken back, which was inoperable. So I was Humpty Dumpty that fell off the wall that couldn't be put back together again. And it was interesting because I had never, ever, even up to that time, wanted back surgery. I'd always seen such horror stories in the medical world of women getting back surgeries and always having forever more back pain. But the interesting thing is when they gave me a prognosis of recovery at 6 weeks and I still was having extreme pain and maintained on narcotics and a walker and all the things at 6 weeks out, I was like, fix me now, like do something. Right. So that's kind of when I switched back to my conventional world mind of like, just fix me, get me back to work. I had all that shame and guilt of not working. I was popping pills left and right. I don't do well with strong painkillers, and I was on a lot of different medications to counteract the side effects. So I, was popping probably 10 pills a day just to maintain my pain and the nausea and the constipation and all the things that go along with it. And I finally did get back to work at about 6 months out. I did have a procedure that got me off of the strong pain medication so I could return to work, but my scope of practice was limited. I could no longer deliver or operate due to the injury. So, I went on for the next year and a half, and it was very interesting with the symptoms that I started discovering I had. And I think I had them all the time. It's just me really sitting quietly with myself and starting to think about these different things that were going on. And, prior to this year and a half out, I was going through all the stages of grief, and in retrospect, now I know that I was angry, I was resentful, all of the things, because everyone else was living their normal life. And here I am having to reinvent mine. I was waking up every morning really without a sense of purpose because I was no longer delivering those babies and operating. And not only that, I had started to develop a lot of physical symptoms, such as inability to get out of bed in the morning, really dragging throughout the day, all day, as far as energy goes. I was living on a pot of coffee a day, energy drinks, grabbing those salty chips because they really tasted even better than they did in the past. And a lot of times I turned to different, more convenient foods, which usually came in a package and could be popped open and eaten in one sitting because I was exhausted. And every time I opened the fridge, I would see the salad mix in there, but I was like, oh my gosh, I'm so tired. Just let me grab something quick that I could go eat back on the couch and lay back down again. And it's really interesting because I started to, really start beating myself up as far as being unmotivated. I felt like a deadbeat mom because at this point, my kids were like 5, 6, 7 years of age, felt like an awful wife. I was gaining weight, like just, for women, a lot of times our weight equates our self-esteem and confidence. And that's exactly how it felt for me. Like I didn't feel comfortable in my own skin. So one night I said to my husband, I can't go on living like this. And that's when I knew I needed some sort of help. I needed to do something because when I'm contemplating no longer living, I know I'm rock bottom. Mm-hmm. But in the conventional world, the only thing I could think it could be was depression. And so I was analyzing forevermore up to my doctor's appointment, like, this doesn't feel like depression. And I even went into her that day and said, I know what you're going to say. You're going to say I have depression. She's like, well, your world was rocked with this injury. Like you're totally turned upside down, career's not as it used to be. And I said, I get it, but I just don't feel like this is what depression should feel like. But I didn't know what else it could be. So I danced down the depression rabbit hole, got put on an antidepressant. And rather quickly on the medication, I realized it did not help my symptoms. Actually, my symptoms continued. And then I had all the side effects. So I was a good patient. I gave it the 3 months before my follow-up. And I went back in. I said, this is not working. And of course, what happens in the conventional world, and I can say this because I used to do this myself, is when one medication doesn't work, you never think of, gosh, do I have the wrong diagnosis? You think medication must not be the right medication for you. So I was put on a second medication, same exact thing happened. And shortly after that time, and I maintained myself on it for a short period of time just to give it a chance, I said, there's something else going on. Coincidentally, at this time, I actually was put in contact with a anti-aging doctor. And I was like, gosh, I don't know what this anti-aging doctor is, but let me chat with her. And it was actually for something completely unrelated to my health. However, we did get on the phone one evening, like 9:00 at night. I had my computer on my lap and I hop on the phone with her. And she quickly, the topic we got on the phone for, she's like, I don't need that, but let's talk about you and what's going on with you, because I understand you had an injury. So in describing my symptoms, she said, gosh, it doesn't sound like depression. It sounds like this condition that we call adrenal fatigue. And this was, mind you, 9 years ago or 7 years ago, actually. And that was a term that we used frequently to describe a condition, which we'll talk about in the near future, where the adrenal glands just were not producing that stress hormone called cortisol as effectively as it had in the past. And it's interesting because here I am good old doctor with her computer on her lap, Googling as she's speaking. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is me. This is me. And two things happened. One, this wave of relief came over me because this woman in this one conversation actually was going to help me. And she gave me my hope back that I could actually have my life back. But number two, like, here I am, a doc at this point with over 15 years of education and experience behind me. I didn't even know about this. I'm like, how is this possible? And how many other women are out there experiencing this? And I thought they had depression too. Mm-hmm. Right on the heels of that, she said, well, I'm looking to open an office about an hour from where you live. Would you like to join me in practice? And I'm like, what do you do? I had no idea. So I didn't, what's anti-aging? Well, she was a functional medicine doctor. So of course I hurry up and Google it. And this is the, I guess, third aha moment of that evening of like, oh my gosh, that sense of purpose that did not have for those 2 years was restored in that one conversation, because this is how I was going to help women moving forward. This is my purpose in life again, to actually help women like me that were incorrectly diagnosed. And again, I don't want to bash my doctor because she didn't know any differently. I didn't know any differently, but there's a lot of docs out there that don't know outside of what we're taught in conventional medical school. So they don't have those tools to help women with these symptoms that I had. And how many women are feeling like me at night? Gosh, I can't go on living. And how many, God, I don't even want to think of who's successful at carrying that out. But like just that feeling of hopeless and helplessness, like I'm never going to feel good again. And so right then, that was my purpose in life, help these women that don't feel heard, that aren't getting the answers, that are chasing their tail, or perhaps want to find other ways of getting healthy. So that catapulted me into the functional medicine world.
Very interesting. So you mentioned it a little bit. You said adrenal fatigue.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's where we should start is it adrenal fatigue? Is it adrenal dysfunction? Are they one and the same? And kind of give us that bird's eye overview of what that condition is that you had that you didn't know that you had.
Yeah. Well, adrenal fatigue, you're not going to find that in the medical books. As a matter of fact, in the conventional world, it's very much poo-pooed. Mm-hmm. But I do think it describes a condition beautifully. And I'll get to describing it in a second. It's now, I kind of break it down, not for your community, because they're much more into the science, but as adrenal dysfunction. And many times we call it hypothalamic pituitary adrenal dysfunction. What that means is there is a dysfunction in, essentially the output of the adrenal glands. And the adrenal glands are these little powerhouses. They're tiny. They're like little pyramids on top of the kidneys. We have 2 of them. And they're tiny, but they are mighty, and they are powerhouses, and they control our electrolytes, essentially the sodium and potassium balance in our body and maintain our blood pressure and all that. But they also secrete the stress hormones. And they also have a component of, female hormones, male hormones, all of that. But like what we're talking about in this context is that production of the stress hormone, namely cortisol. So cortisol is a hormone that essentially when you wake up in the morning without that alarm clock, your eyes just go bing, awake because the sun's coming up. That is your cortisol spiking in the morning. And that's our natural alarm clock to wake up and get going for the day. And essentially what happens from there is cortisol in textbook style should gradually come down throughout the day. So it should be highest in the morning, which gets us up and out of bed, gives us a go for the day. And throughout the day, we start, coming down, and to the point where in the evening, when the sun goes down and the moon comes up, it's a signal to our body that time for bed. Cortisol is at its lowest. And it's kind of on a seesaw with melatonin. So as cortisol comes down in the evening, melatonin, which is our sleep hormone, rises. And that gives our body a signal that it's time to go to sleep. The issue arises from chronic stress. Now, I don't want to say stress is bad. Actually, stress is really good for us. Hormetic stresses, like stresses of intermittent fasting or prolonged fasting. And that's all good stressors on our body, but it's acute, meaning it's short term. These longer term stressors, or even say, for instance, you're giving a talk in front of a crowd of people, or you're taking a test. Those are all healthy stressors. Our body does well with those. The issue arises when we have these 24/7 stressors. It used to be just work and finances and kids, right? You have all that, you have now a global pandemic, but let's also think of like women, we wake up, like all the things that we have to do. And we're already beating ourselves up when we step on that scale first thing in the morning. And oh my gosh, my pants aren't fitting right. Oh my gosh, what am I doing? And like this is a series of our thoughts throughout the day that we're actually beating ourselves up on top of all of the other stressors we have, including the kids virtually schooling during the pandemic and, trying to keep it all together and, finances over this 20+ month global pandemic and all of the things that I mentioned that because I've seen this has always been an issue, but it's been a huge issue over the past year and a half. And our little adrenal glands start getting fatigued, to the point where they can't keep up with that cortisol production anymore. And that rhythm that we used to see where it's high in the morning and gradually falls and is low in the evening becomes dysfunctional. And it's not necessarily high in the morning. And that was the case with me when I actually had my testing done. And what we did was a salivary cortisol. So I basically spit in a tube 4 times a day, and they check my cortisol throughout the day, which is the preferred way of testing your cortisol. I found that I was low in the morning. And, when I saw that result, I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't in my head. Like, this is for real. Like that get up and go hormone is not getting up and going. Yeah. It is low. And, for me personally, it was all those years as, not sleeping as an OBGYN, not eating well. Then I birthed twins. And if I wasn't delivering somebody else's baby, I was taking care of my babies. And, I was thriving, I think. And I always say my dream life, because at that point I was just living on adrenaline, I think, quite frankly. And it's when I fell off that horse, it was the straw that broke the camel's back. It was that event that just put me over the edge, because I may have been able to continue to go on that way for a while longer. But just literally going from 150 miles an hour to on the couch with a walker, with a shower chair, with a brace, all the things made my body say, threw my body into shock essentially and said, oh my gosh, all those years. And now we have a new stressor, which is this chronic pain and this injury. Mm-hmm. So, when I looked at my cortisol, it was exactly how I felt. It was low all throughout the day. And interestingly enough, it was starting to rise in the evening. So I would actually get a second wind at 10 o'clock if I didn't go to bed. And that's a stage of this adrenal dysfunction that we commonly see. And it's actually the most common stage I used to see in my patients, whereby they couldn't get out of bed in the morning. They lived on the coffee all day and just stimulants to get you through the day. They're eating those salty foods because, again, the adrenal glands actually help with our electrolyte balance. So we, number one, have a craving for the salt, but number two, they're a food of convenience. And when we're exhausted, we're grabbing the cookies, the salty foods, the things that are quick and make us feel good because we don't feel good. And then, in the evening, many times, if you don't go to bed by 10 p.m., you can actually get a second wind and stay up till midnight, 1 o'clock, which is really not good for healing your body from adrenal conditions.
No. And I wanted to talk as well about the pregnenolone steal, mm-hmm. which we may have touched on in this podcast before, but I'd like you to go in a little bit more detail and talk about what that is and why weight gain, especially around the midsection, is so common with this adrenal dysfunction condition or adrenal fatigue.
Yeah. It's multifactorial when it comes to the weight gain. The cortisol in itself will do that for you or to you. It's our stress hormone, right? Like when you are stressed and your body's under stress, the last thing your body wants to do is lose fat because it thinks you're dying. And I always like to bring it down. Like your body doesn't know the difference between, gosh, I hate my job and I feel trapped in my job, which, by the way, feeling trapped is one of the worst stressors you can have. Or I don't know what to have in my coffee in the morning. Like it's all stressing you out, right? Like your body doesn't know the difference. Or my legs got cut off, like all to your body the same. What your body is saying, oh my God, she's going to die, right? Oh my gosh, we got to keep as much fat on her body, because if she goes through this stage where she's not able to get nutrition because she can't walk because you got a leg cut off, or again, that's extreme, but your body is just trying to keep you safe. It's a survival mechanism. So a lot of times we will store fat. Number one, there's actually more cortisol receptors on the adipose fat tissue in the midsection. So when you have a cortisol issue, you're stimulating those receptors, which they're little chemical messengers into your cells. You have more around the midsection. So there's that. And when we get to the pregnenolone steal, and I love to talk about this because as an OBGYN, I was actually forced to memorize this pathway and all of the enzymes. And it did not make sense to me back then. It was just a way of passing my board exams and moving on and practicing. I love the pathway now because it makes so much sense. And when we talk about this pathway, it all starts with cholesterol. So a lot of people out there think cholesterol is bad. No. We need cholesterol. We need cholesterol to make our hormones. I would always worry in the past when I'd see men with really low cholesterol. I'm like, no wonder you have a low testosterone. You can't even make it because your cholesterol is so low. So it starts with cholesterol and then goes down to this hormone called pregnenolone. Now, pregnenolone can branch off into different hormones. And essentially what happens with that pregnenolone steal is when we are trying to churn out a ton of cortisol, which is our stress hormone, our body prioritizes making the cortisol from the pregnenolone. What it does is it robs all the other hormones that pregnenolone can make, including estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. And it's another great one I love, which is DHEA, which is an immediate precursor to testosterone. Those are all robbed of their precursor just to feed the cortisol. Okay. And again, it's a survival mechanism. Your body's like, we don't need to make those female and male hormones right now. We got to survive. So we need to make this cortisol to keep dealing with this stressor. And then of course that comes all with the, effects of weight gain, because lower testosterone, you lose lean body mass. Again, a common thing I hear with men with low testosterone and women as we age is that loss of lean muscle mass and accumulation of adipose tissue, particularly in the abdominal section. So, and then of course, the female hormone imbalance that can result. And again, if for some reason you are out of balance with your estrogen and progesterone, an estrogen dominance pitch will definitely give you more weight gain in that middle as well. So it is multifactorial how this can affect the stress, and adrenal dysfunction can affect weight gain, especially in the middle, and weight gain period on a hormonal level, male, female, as well as cortisol.
Right. I think that was such an interesting pathway. And if you want to Google how would they see it visually if they wanted to see I call it pregnenolone. You kind of pronounce it a little bit differently. Pregnenolone. Is that?
I say pregnenolone. Yeah. Pregnenolone, okay. Pregnenolone is, yeah. You could probably say, gosh, I don't even remember how I used to Google it, like hormone pathway or cholesterol hormone pathway, maybe something like that. You're probably going to find multiple little graphs coming up. And it's so funny because on all these talks I used to give, I wanted to bring that up. And my assistant's always like, that's too sciencey. People get lost in all but it's really cool because you can actually pull up as or re-listen to this interview, pull it up and look to see what I'm talking about. And it makes sense that like when you're shunting everything to a particular area of this pathway just to make the stress hormone, you're robbing your body of all those other hormones. So that are really critical for, overall function, healthy female, male function and weight loss and, preventing weight gain and just feeling amazing.
Yeah. And I'm taking a look at my notes here, and we had kind of 3 different areas that we wanted to touch on regarding what can cause or what contributes to this adrenal fatigue. And that was the first one. The first one was really stress, kind of taxing the adrenal glands to produce more cortisol. And you're going to see less estrogen, testosterone, all those sex hormones. And then you also wanted to talk about endocrine disruptors and how that can kind of contribute to some estrogen dominance. And so let's go down that rabbit hole next on endocrine disruptors. First of all, tell us what they are and how they can cause estrogen dominance and what the symptoms would be there.
Yeah. Well, and I just want to add too, that this can be another reason why a woman's libido might be low. The stress definitely, and all the hormonal impacts with that, as well as the weight gain, which affects women, and as well as these endocrine disrupting chemicals, interacting with mostly the female hormones. So these are When we talk about endocrine disrupting chemicals, it might seem like a big, like, what are they? Like, okay, endocrine, I know they're hormonal, they disrupt, but how, right? The ones I love to focus on are those that disrupt estrogen and testosterone. And, let's talk about estrogen. There are chemicals, particularly a lot of in our personal care products and plastics, perfume products, and some foods that actually can act like estrogen. So what that means is there's a lot of different ways that they can act like estrogen and affect the estrogen receptor. But the most common one, I think the easiest one to describe, is that many of them actually mimic estrogen. They actually look enough like estrogen, and that they can unlock the little key to the door of the estrogen receptor on cells. So they can fit into that same lock and key and turn on the cell, stimulating the cell like estrogen would. So what that means is that you may not be producing the estrogen in your body from your ovaries or your adrenals, but your body's seeing extra estrogen from chemicals that is actually doing the same effect on the cells as the au natural estrogen in your body. So what that means is your body's actually getting a signal that you have more estrogen on board than you really are making in your body from a lot of these endocrine disrupting chemicals that we talk about in toxins. So, they essentially do that same pathway and, give you the same effects. And the most common ones I see in women are, you can have menstrual irregularities, such as heavier, more painful bleeding, a very common and more frequent periods. That's something I see a lot. Weight gain, again, another one I see a lot. A third one I see all the time is mood issues. Women become much more irritable. And I always like to say, like, let's not demonize estrogen too much, right? Like, estrogen is what makes us beautiful women. It gives us our plump skin and lips and it makes us look younger. However, too much of it can make, it's like Little Red Riding or whatever, too much is not a good thing. I forgot the analogy from my childhood days, but we also want to balance it with progesterone. So if you might actually have a great estrogen progesterone balance normally in your cycle, but when you take on these other chemicals that are in these plastics and personal care products and foods that actually tip you over the edge when it comes to estrogen, now you're out of balance. And progesterone, we never talk about progesterone enough, but it's our hormone that's very cyclical also throughout the month, but it's of the two hormones, it's the more calming hormone. It's the chill hormone versus estrogen, which is a little more of our edge kind of hormone, keeps us on our again, too much of it can make us a little bit of a moody. Yeah. And that's why we really love to call in progesterone for that balance of okay, not too much moody, just enough to, know it's that, that we're cycling, but not too much that you want to take your partner's head off. So, one of the biggest thing I hear from women are the menstrual problems, such as the heavier bleeding, the weight gain, and the moodiness. And
so would that be an example too of women who get their hormones checked and maybe their doctors say your hormone levels look fine, but they could still have symptoms of estrogen dominance if they have a lifestyle that exposes them regularly to the personal care and other toxins that mimic estrogen. So they could still have symptoms of estrogen dominance, even if they're not technically experiencing estrogen dominance.
Exactly. And this is where I see so many frustrated women out there that say, my doctor, number one, a lot of times your doc won't check your hormone levels. As an OBGYN, I would have women come in and ask me this. And again, this is before I knew about functional medicine. And I was always humble enough to say, I don't know how to check hormone levels aside from determining whether you're ovulating. Yeah. Those are usually women trying to get pregnant or you're menopausal. Those honestly were the only two times that I was trained to check hormone levels. Everything else I was trained that are just, you don't need them. You don't need to check your estrogen throughout the cycle. You don't need, so your doctor, number one, may not know how to, in their defense, they may not want to because they don't see the utility in checking it. But even if they check it, they're like, okay, let's cross that off that's normal. But now you're like, oh my gosh, but I don't feel like it's normal. Here's another thing for you to think about. Where are these endocrine disrupting chemicals sneaking into your lifestyle that you can easily remove and hopefully start normalizing your estrogens?
Yeah. Can you just maybe spit off a few of the top chemicals or endocrine disruptors that you focus on with your clients to remove from their lifestyle?
Yeah. Two big ones. anything perfumed.
Okay.
Which you'll find if you, and this was an issue for me. Parabens are usually, a component of fragrance products. And I was actually sensitive to parabens a couple of years ago, right around Christmas time. So I guess it was 3 years ago. And I was trying to shop for a lotion for myself. And I went into the store, and every single lotion I looked at had fragrance, parfum, proprietary fragrance. And I'm going over and saying, does this contain parabens? They're like, I don't know. Right. So the problem there is a lot of these, fragrances, perfumes are actually endocrine disrupting chemicals. I think there's like over 300 different ways that they can say that.
Okay.
But they all disrupt your hormones. So what's best is to, and they sneak into lotions, shampoos, perfume. We think of regular perfumes, but think of how many lotions are scented, body washes, shampoos, conditioners. We're all into the fragrance, right? And yeah, I love good fragrance myself, but what is it doing to my body when I put it on it? Because our skin is our largest organ of our body. There's so many areas of absorption to get into our body and disrupt our hormones. And, that's number one, but number two, think of how many chemicals a woman puts on her body a day, shampoo, conditioner, mousse, hair, how many hair products, hairspray, then our makeup and our skincare products all smell like, oh, this smells so lemony and this smells so great if it's fragrance with an essential oil. But if it's this code word, perfume, fragrance, not good, try to get it fragrance free if possible. Or like I said, use essential oils. And, again, with makeup, even there's a lot of, very complex words that are in makeup, but a lot of makeup products are also endocrine disrupting. And, if you look at say your foundation, how many actual ingredients are in your foundation? There's probably 30. Mm-hmm. And women tend to put on, I think the average is I don't know. I think it's more 300 to 500 chemicals a day, because each of those products have 30 different ingredients times how many different products between our hair, our makeup, our lotion, our shaving cream, our, you name it, right? Our foot scrub, we go on and on. So there's that. And then, number two, plastics. Okay. Plastics are huge. So this can be as simple as trying to swap out your, we can all go into the grocery store and all the plastics in there, but the easiest is your storage containers at home. A lot of us buy the cheaper, Ziploc storage containers that are plastic. The problem is, and even if it says BPA free, it does not mean it's chemical free. Mm-hmm. Those other BPS, BPF, they have not been proven to be any safer than this BPA. And it's really dangerous when you put hot substances in these plastics, mm-hmm. because what happens then is the heat leaches the chemicals from the plastic, and then you either eat it or you drink it. So mm-hmm. another, hot water bottles in the summer, how many of us I used to
sure.
I hate hot water, but I leave it in there. I'm oh, I'm so desperate and thirsty. I drink it. It's laden with the chemicals in the bottle. Same with Starbucks coffee cups, the top plastic, take the top off, don't drink.
Yeah, that's a good tip.
Yeah. So I can understand a lot of your listeners will be oh my gosh, that's so expensive to throw them all out and get glass. While you're trying to trade out, little by little, just make sure that your food is cooled. Cause I have a couple in my house. I'm not going to lie. I have a couple, but I'm adamant about cooling the food before I put it in the storage container. So it sits on the stove forever, or transfer it to another bowl to cool down. And then I transfer it. And then you definitely don't microwave or heat in these, or put them in the dishwasher. So, my husband's pretty conditioned now, the very little plastic we have in this house, no dishwasher, no putting anything in the microwave. And even my kids are pretty conditioned, even to the point today where we had some of these plastic spoons, and my daughter brought soup to school, and I'm no plastic spoon, that's going to leach. She's okay, mom, give me a real spoon. So, this is how ingrained it is in my life. I'm I just always think where, and if you have kids too, we can start really young with these kids of it's normal for my kids to not eat certain foods on the, normally, because they don't want them now, because they weren't raised on eating, drinking the sodas and such. But such things as glass, like they'll get stainless steel or glass water bottles, or, so they're really aware. So hopefully as they get older, they'll continue that awareness through their adult years. But what we do has a huge impact on the hormones of our kids as well. So that's an easy thing, just being more aware of the plastics. We can go into the plastics of the wrapping on your, and that's a whole nother topic of like deli meats and such. But yeah, start at home, start with the storage containers and your water bottles, get a reusable water bottle, mostly for the environment too, right? Like a stainless steel, I have one sitting here right now, like either glass or stainless steel, keeps your water nice and cold, and you're not going to get any chemicals leached from it.
I think it's okay too for people listening just to go in phases, like we recently changed out our Tupperware, but it took a long time.
Yeah.
It took a couple of years, it is an investment for sure where I'm not just going to throw away all my shampoo. I'm going to use it. And then the next time I need shampoo, I'm going to change it out, so we don't have to kind of have any sort of fast or extreme mindsets about any of this. I just think it's good to know and good to learn. So the next time you need to buy something, you can make a better choice. The last thing that we wanted to talk about related to low libido and kind of some of the science behind what could cause it would be food and gut health. So can you give some top tips on ways that people can optimize their nutrition and gut health to improve their libido? And then we'll pivot towards the end of the conversation to talk about mindset.
Absolutely. What a lot of people don't realize is that your gut is integral to your hormonal balance, especially estrogen. And what is so fascinating about gut health is that it's ever evolving. And we're finding out that these little powerful bugs in your gut, these things, bacteria and fungi and all viruses, like all the things, like they have a integral part of our health and keeping us healthy. And one of the really interesting things is that there's actually an enzyme in some of the gut bacteria. There's different strains of the gut bacteria, and they all have different ways of like breaking down carbohydrates, and that's all the fun nutrition side. But when it comes to hormonal, there's a hormone called beta glucuronidase that actually breaks down estrogen. And so, the breakdown of estrogen and removal from our body is a really beautiful process between the liver and the gut. And what you don't want is that little final step of this enzyme not working appropriately, which can happen if you don't have the appropriate gut, what they call microbiome or bacteria, is that you don't have the enzyme producing ability to remove the estrogen from your body. And it actually gets recirculated back into your body. And, our poor little livers, hopefully we've optimized our livers to try to break it down as well. Such things as cutting down on alcohol or no alcohol, the prescription medications, are two key things that will help your liver actually deal with what it's got coming at it with other toxins, including the hormones. But when we actually have to get to excreting the hormones, making sure that you have your microbiome in tip-top shape. Now, what is really harmed, and I think the biggest takeaway has really harmed the gut microbiome, is our lack of fiber in our diet. And, I think the average American is not the average, like 97% of Americans or some crazy statistic like that is actually deficient in fiber.
Interesting. Huh.
Because yeah, why? Look at the processed food. It's all refined. It all has, all those refined carbs have all of the good fiber taken out of them. And that's really what our gut microbiome needs. It needs it to make special, other what they call short chain fatty acids like butyrate that actually helps protect your gut, helps you, helps decrease the inflammation and prevent colon cancer and all those things, but helps with weight loss. But also, we need these bacteria to thrive to make this enzyme to break down these hormones. And so, and again, just think of our diets out of, maybe it's not even, I can think back of when I was having my adrenal issues, like out of the necessity of my fatigue and convenience, I was turning towards those quick foods, right? And I was surviving. I wasn't thriving on them. And it was really interesting because I did a gut health test a couple of years ago and I had like 0 butyrate, which is really a protective short chain fatty acid made by particular gut bacteria. Actually, it's made by fermentation of fiber by these gut bacteria. But like I have no butyrate. And it was really interesting because that puts me at risk of a lot of issues with my gut. So, and it was as a result of my poor diet. quite frankly. So what I really became aware of is where can I put fiber throughout my day? Because the last thing I want your listeners to do is say, okay, she said have fiber. I'm going to go and have 30 grams of fiber in one meal. You're really going to hate me because you're going to get constipated and you're going to get bloated and all the things. Like, start low and go slow is my motto for everything. When you do supplements, when you do dietary changes, when you do, including fiber, like start introducing a little bit throughout the whole day so your body can start getting used to it. You can start feeding these gut bacteria to start being able to help these colonies of gut bacteria not only survive, but thrive and be able to, make these beneficial short chain fatty acids, as well as these enzymes to break down your hormones.
Yep. And I think it's great because fiber is so easy to add. It's a really nice tack on food. You can just Google foods high in fiber, and just tack them onto your meal, sprinkle them on top, have them on the side, make a little veggie, maybe put some flax or chia or spinach in your smoothie. Just easy things like that can make a big difference in the long run.
Yeah.
Good to know. Increasing fiber can kind of help then improve the gut microbiome to be able to clear excess estrogen from the body, and then also help with that estrogen dominance and improve libido. Is that kind of the takeaway there?
That's the gist. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's pivot into the mindset. And, maybe someone has all of those areas dialed in and they're still having low libido. What could be going on there?
Yeah. Mindset is integral to any component of health, in my opinion. I mean, we talk about it with nutrition, like you said, with libido, it's no different. Low libido in women, especially. I worked with men for 4 years, and they are a little bit different than women because generally for men, a lot of times I would say 100% of my patients had low testosterone. I repleted that and they felt better. And then the question was, why did they have low testosterone? But for women, I realized it wasn't necessarily a direct correlation with testosterone levels in women. We're not little men, as one of my colleagues, Dr. Stephanie Estima, would say. We are completely different. And, we're much more complex hormonally, biologically and brain wise, much different than men. And that goes with our thoughts, even I've studied, the size of our different areas of our brain are different. So how we even perceive, we're much more sensitive to someone's facial expressions and tone and such, whereas men are care less. And they look at your face and they're like, they don't read into it. We read into it. Right. So there's how we perceive our everyday world, but how we think about ourselves. So, again, kind of going back to what I talked about with adrenal dysfunction and those thoughts that we have from the time we wake up to the time we go to bed. Again, another statistic, close to 80% of the thoughts we have in the day are negative. Oh my gosh. And how many times, a lot of times we don't catch ourselves saying these things because we say them all the time over and over to ourselves, to the point where our minds and our bodies start believing these kind of things, So, for instance, with nutrition, I've never been able to stick on a diet more than 3 weeks or eat well for 3 weeks, or, right around the holidays, I can't eat well throughout the holidays. I never have been able to, start now. There's also that fixed mindset and that growth mindset. And the difference is that fixed is and there's actually been research that shows that you were never going to be able to improve your libido in a fixed mindset. When it comes to libido, if you say it's never going to get better, I'm never, those extreme, you're stuck in that, really that victim mentality of thinking a certain way, of a certain lifestyle, of, certain relationship, and it's never going to get better, versus that growth of okay, here's where I am now. How can we make this better? And so, that comes to, again, I'm all for women optimizing their health. And if they have to, they want to lose weight, losing weight to a healthy weight, that's what they want. But try to really, love your body in that process, because our bodies have done amazing things over the past year and a half of keeping us healthy. Right. And, just appreciating the journey that you're on, wherever that next destination, because a lot of times women are looking for that next thing to make them happy. They get to that next thing and I'm I'm still not happy. Right. Enjoy the journey. And, and I know it's easier to say, but it's really a process of trying to love the body you're in on the journey to wherever you're going health-wise, and, really recognizing, bringing awareness around those thoughts that you have every day, and how can we tweak those thoughts so they're not so negative, okay, you don't love how your body looks now, but how, you're doing things to improve your strength, your immune system, your weight, all of it, so like, where are you on that journey? Because I also hear a lot of women saying, like, I don't like the way I look. And again, there's a whole mindset component, which, we won't get into, but like, and I can say like, love the body you're in. It's a process, right? But when I hear it all the time from my clients, like, I don't like myself and my body, so I wear baggy clothes and I don't want to get naked. Right. So like, again, it's just that starting with yourself and like trying not to have a little grace on yourself and not beat yourself up over your weight or your inability to carry through on certain goals that you've had in the past. Like, there's no better way to start the now of that new goal and actually visualizing yourself succeeding this time and getting that support that you need. A lot of women thrive on support and accountability and having a group of women around them doing the same thing they're doing until it becomes a lifestyle. And then you really have a better way of sticking to the lifestyle, including the mindset awareness that you have every day of telling yourself a different story. Because they're all stories, any thought we have, we can find evidence for it around us, good or bad, right? Like, and so start trying to find the evidence of the good in your day and in your life and in your health, and start crowding out that negative as much as possible.
Yeah, I think in my online program, we do a monthly challenge. And so we're recording this in December. And so December's monthly challenge is to practice gratitude, but in a little different way.
Mm-hmm.
And I came up with, every day or at least once a week, tell yourself something that you're proud of.
Mm-hmm.
It's an innate quality. So nothing physical at all. Like, were you kind? Were you generous? Were you hospitable? Were you thoughtful? Were you considerate? And like, specify the moment in the last 24 hours. And so really appreciating our innate characteristics like we do everyone else. I think we appreciate others and we're grateful for others, but then we have to turn that gratitude and pride inward to kind of bolster that self-confidence. And then the other one was, what's something about your body that you're grateful for? So not something that you like necessarily, because I think a lot of women who come to us might feel insecure in their own skin. Mm-hmm. But I met a woman the other day who had macular degeneration. And so she couldn't see her central vision. And I thought, how grateful am I to have my eyesight and watch my children play? Cool. And you can't lie to yourself. You can't, if you don't like your thighs or your stomach, you can be like, oh, I love my thighs and my stomach, but you can probably find something that you do appreciate about your body. And I think starting with that truth and being consistent and practicing gratitude and praising yourself can really help bolster that confidence to eventually, hopefully spill over to an increased libido or just confidence overall. But did you have any other little tidbits or kind of helpful hints that you wanted to share for that?
Well, I think, and I agree, it's hard to like get that. I love my body the way it is now, although there are some women out there that can do that, which is amazing. Right. But I also think trying not to focus on like every little imperfection that you consider you have in your body, and like you said, focus on, I think every woman out there has to have something you love about your body. Like, maybe not, maybe in your eyes or your white teeth or your earlobes or something, like just something, but trying not to focus on the negative and what you don't like, like, again, those negative vibes, like the focus on the negative, you bring more negative to you. Exactly. Like you want to focus on the positive and like, what do you want? Right. Like does not focus on what you don't want. What do you want? Mm-hmm. And if you want thighs that aren't touching or whatever body goals you have, that's what you want. Just to say what you don't want, so you, and wake up every day with that determination of like, what, I'm going to do it this time. Prove yourself wrong, like we can all do it. And that was me, 9 years ago. For 2 years, I call it that victim mode.
Right.
But I was stuck in this like very sad place mentally. And I can say I did a ton of mindset work, and that's really what helped me wake up one day in May of 2014. And, I literally woke up one day and I'm like, no one's going to do this but me. Like, no one's going to lose the weight, get my confidence back, my self-esteem, my strength back, my health back, but me. No doctor's going to give me the pill because they've not worked in the past. no one's, no one, I'm going to have to put the work in and do it. And I'm telling you, little by little, that was the one morning I woke up and went to my basement. I started doing a little workout when I actually had told myself a story for 2 years that I couldn't do workouts because of my back. It was a story I told myself. And when I flipped that switch and said, I'm going to do what I can, it may not be what the girl on the video is doing, but I'm going to do what I can. I modified my heck through workouts, but you know what? I got stronger. Little by little, I lost the weight to the point where at the 3-month mark, my husband's like, what are you doing in the morning before everybody gets up? And I was actually doing it very quietly. Like, I'm like, and it wasn't out of like, oh, watch me come out of this. So this was like, this is for me. This is not for anyone else. But I was like, I'm going to the basement. I'm working out. And he's like, can you show me what you're doing? Cause I'd like to do that too. And then I was making my smoothies. He's like, can you show me how to make that? And like, honestly, when I say that, especially women in a household, we change the entire household. It is so true. Like my husband followed suit. He is now like the healthiest he's ever been in his life at the age of 52. He just turned 52. My kids are so much healthier. And it's like, not one of these things like my daughter was making fun of me that one of their friends were calling me the healthy mom, but I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think it's just the way my kids have grown up, and I don't deprive them. It's just moderation. And like, there are better choices more times than not to make. And that's how they've grown up. So like, it's just how we think. And, I think, and it's not been my whole life. That's my point. Like, this is not how I've lived my whole life.
Yep. You can't change, no matter how old you are, no matter what you're going through.
And I had so many obstacles and so many things that telling myself I couldn't do this, including an injury. I couldn't get strong. I did bodybuilding competition and I did very well. That's why I'm saying with that point of like, I don't have to stay stuck here and watch me. I'll show you I can do it. And I did it. Like, it was for me. It wasn't for the trophies I have right here to my right. It was for me. And, now I've done that. I'm like, okay, like I'm proud of myself that I actually did that. And, now I'm just showing others what's possible when you actually put your mind to it and like just change that story in your head that you can't do it. You can, and you will. You just got to show up every day. Little consistent steps every day will get you to that big goal at the end.
Yes. Well, Dr. Renee, I've really enjoyed our conversation today. I think that it was hopefully really educational for our audience. If they've been experiencing low libido or they think they might have adrenal dysfunction and they want to connect with you further, how can they reach you?
My website, drrenewellenstein.com, is a great place to go. And actually, I'm all over social media. Pretty much everything. I'm Dr. Renee Wellenstein across all platforms, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I also have a podcast, which you were on, that we just rebranded to The Real Heal. It used to be called Love the Leap with Dr. Renee. And, it's just, I'm passionate about getting information out there for women and on this topic of low libido, because it is so mysterious and so complex. And if one woman has like an aha moment from listening to anything on any of my platforms, my purpose is served.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. We'll be sure to link up to all of Dr. Renee's resources in the show notes for this episode. If you have not yet subscribed to this podcast or YouTube channel, please take a moment and do that today. It helps this interview get seen by more people. Thank you so much, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you.